Charles Coleman, a showbiz man, was born in 1927. As a boy, he was always fascinated with theater and acting, but could never land a job as a mainstream actor. After he graduated college with a degree in medicine, he met his best friend, soon-to-be business partner, Richard Maxwell. Richard was born in 1926 and also loved acting, although he was much more cocky about it, seeing himself as a Dick Van Dyke kind of actor, wanting to be put on a pedestal and not being told what to do. Even though Charles was compassionate and kind, and Richard being tempered and stern, they got along quite nicely and did almost everything together. They would even try to find jobs as mainstream actors together. However, just like I said before, they could never land one. Richard was getting impatient, but then in 1958 came up with a solution to their problem. If they can't be mainstream actors, why not bring the mainstream to them? Charles was confused, but Richard had all these ideas. He proposed a theater/restaurant chain where they can be the big stars of the show, as well as bring in people to eat, as sort of a kill two birds with one stone kind of a deal. Charles was excited by this idea and took it a step further. Why not market it to what children wanted? Entertainment after a long decade of rebuilding after World War II. Richard didn't want to be just a kid's entertainer, as he found it a waste of talent. But Charles was able to do some convincing, and Richard was quickly on board. After many days, weeks, even months of planning out what was going into the restaurant, they had to come up with a line of characters to entertain the children. So one day, at lunch, when discussing what characters should be within the restaurant, Charles spotted a cat walking by, and Richard saw a small mouse run across the ground. They looked at each other and knew, we got our characters. So, they went back to their now being built diner and drew up some sketches for Candy Cat and Roger Rat. They were simple costumes, just slip up and off again. It was brilliant, they thought. So now they have the building get up, they got the characters, and they've got actors. All they needed now was the staff. Over the months, they were able to find some people willing to wait to work, in which they found 5, which was all they needed. However, one day, a woman wandered into the restaurant, nearly complete. Her name was Sheila Rose. Sheila Rose was a married mother of 3, Mary, Marla, and Clayton Rose. They had just moved into town and she was looking for a job. Charles happily accepted her as a mascot cleaner and cook. Sheila happily accepted her job. However, it wouldn't be long before tragedy struck. The suits weren't all happy-go-lucky, but they were quite dangerous to put on. The big zippers and cogs in the back could easily mangle one's hand and possibly bleed out. Richard was supposed to warn her about this, but didn't, and Sheila managed to get her hand stuck and mangled by the machines. She had punctured an artery and bled to death quite quickly. Richard and Charles would find her. Charles was absolutely horrified, and Richard felt responsible. He let an innocent woman die, all because he forgot one simple thought. After this incident, Richard started to drink, letting him forget all of his sorrows and mistakes. Charles couldn't jeopardize their dream over some dead girl, he thought, before the restaurant opened just next week. So Charles, in the moment, discarded the body. However, he would feel guilty not telling anyone about this. It wasn't the right thing to do. And so he vowed this should never happen again. But we couldn't look at that now. Now the week came, and the grand opening of the Rat and Cat Theater was a success. I want to detour here and explain what happened to Sheila. You're probably saying, you explained what happened to her. And yes, you're correct, but I'm talking about her soul, as it would still live on, even after her death. See, she was a major crafter, in which Mary would love to craft with her all the time. In these precious memories came the origami cat. They crafted it together. She would go on to possess that craft. However, in her anger and resentment against the men that let her die, a shadow of her negative sides was created. Shadow Candy. This side was hard to control, but as long as she was inside the origami cat, she was still her kind and sweet self, watching over her family. Sheila will return later. A year had passed since the incident and the opening. With Clayton and Marla out of town with an aunt, Mary, at this time 8, and her father Frank decided to spend the entire week together. Frank, having to work full-time at the theater, as it was a very busy week, had to bring Mary along with him everywhere, since he couldn't afford a sitter. Mary didn't mind, however, as she made great new friends with a girl named Molly and a boy named Aiden. She would also come across the rat and cat a lot. She would play hide and seek and tag with them, all good fun times. There's also another character she didn't really go to, however, the puppeteer and his puppet Vinny. She always felt a negative aura around him and didn't really trust going up to him. On the Friday Frank had to work full-time, Mary had come across a group of kids playing hide and seek with the rat. She joined in the fun and went to go hide. She saw that the cat came out of the back room and decided to hide in there. She saw a locker and hid inside. The rat, Richard, saw her go in and headed inside. The puppeteer, named Nathan Richards, saw the clear signs. Richard was drunk. Very drunk. Even after a year, his grief only got worse, and his drinks only got more expensive. Nathan tried to take the suit off and force him to go home, but Richard fought back, and after a struggle, Nathan pushed him, and Richard hit his head in the back of the table. This triggered the mechanisms, mangling his neck, and dying quickly. The cat, Charles, came inside to see what all the ruckus was about. He couldn't believe it. It happened again. Not letting it go this time, as he vowed all those years ago. He went to go to the phone and call the police. But Nathan couldn't just throw his life away like this. So he went up to Charles and strangled him, which again triggered the mechanisms, mangling his neck, and he died pretty quickly. Nathan gave the police a fake story and evacuated the building. Mary was horrified. She ran outside and found her father. Shortly after, the Rat and Cat Theater was closed. Jaden Chelsea, former friend of Richard, was able to obtain the rights to their entire company. She was now the new owner. She figured the suits were not a viable option for entertainment, so she decided to start work on a new technology, animatronics. The Rat and Cat stayed the same, however, with new updated features, and of course the new animatronic technology. These robots were the perfect place for Charles and Richards to find refuge in. Their souls would pass to these robots and possess them. Richard turned into a broken spirit. He was a nobody, and on top of that, the little brat Mary had ruined his life. She's the one that got him killed. He was furious. Charles, on the other hand, turned into a broken spirit as well, but depressed. He was filled with guilt that he was just too naive to face anything like a man. So, he turned into a depressed, broken spirit. As for Mary, now 10 years old, she repressed the memories deep down from what happened at the Rat and Cat Theater and moved past it, for the most part. So now, with all of that, it was time for the grand opening of the new Rat and Cat Diner. Mary and her little brother Clayton attended to the opening, as Mary wanted to learn to love that place again, but this would be a day to remember, not for the right reasons. Richard, possessing the new rat, and full of anger, was able to get back at Mary. She ruined their lives. Why should she get off scot-free, he thought. He reached down at the very excited Clayton and scratched his face deep and hard. Mary was horrified, grabbed her brother and ran out to her father, who immediately ran to the hospital. A panic ensued and the place closed down. not even a day after its opening. In the following months, Clayton was able to fully heal, but went blind in his right eye. Mary couldn't handle this. She fell into a major pool of PTSD, with the memories of the original diner coming back, and coming back strong. She would eventually attend therapy every 2 days. It was so bad. Her therapist, Agnes Holly, made sure she got the right treatment she needed, but it wouldn't be long before Mary's grief would manifest itself into monsters. Mary's grief and memories were so much that they manifested themselves into nightmarish monsters during the night. These monsters were Monster Rat and Monster Cat. These reflected the worst of her memories and trauma coming back to haunt her. She would go on to have continuous nightmares about these monsters, so much so Frank had to get a cassette tape player to play calming music just so she can close her eyes. During these frightening weeks, memories of the original diner would slowly start to come back to her, making her remember what happened. But let's not forget she repressed these memories. It's all very foggy. Anyways, by the end of this terrible week, she remembered a puppet, nothing specific, but enough to manifest into a monster. This nightmare and monsters only got worse and worse, not better. But one day in therapy, Agnes sat her down and told her that she needs to face her monsters, saying that if she didn't, she couldn't move forward with her trauma. Mary took the advice, and the next night she saw them. She proclaimed she wasn't afraid, not anymore. Just then, the monsters started to calm down, hiding from her instead. Over the next couple of nights, she would learn to try and tame them. She used music, toys, even just speaking to them, and in about a week, she was able to tame the monsters, and now they turned into her nice imaginary friends. She beat her trauma, but she still couldn't remember exactly what happened. That was until... During the night, instead of finding herself awake and fighting off monsters, she found herself in her old room, where her mom and Mary would have crafted together. There, in the middle of the room, was a small origami cat. She proclaimed that she is not a foe, but a friend. She wants to help Mary remember what happened, and the only way for her to help is if Mary could retrieve artifacts and toys from the dreamscape, bring them back to her, and the memories would come back. So the solution was simple. Head out into the dreamscape and find what the origami cat wanted. So, Mary, Ratty, and Kitty went out to search for these items. Over the next week, they would find her old toys, reviving the memories from when her mom was alive, as well as the newspapers bringing back the memories from the theater. She was fully able and clearly able to remember everything except the last day. So, one more night, they went back in, but something wasn't right this time. Paths were destroyed, forcing her to cross the black parts without paths. Ratty and Kitty couldn't go on these black parts, as they would slip through and possibly drown. But Mary could stand on this. Odd. So she braved it herself. After searching and searching, she found herself in a clearing, a valley full of trees. Just then, a voice started to speak. He was talking to her about past months of nightmares, therapy, and searching in the dreamscape. Mary was confused and quite scared, and the voice showed himself. It was none other than Richard. Mary was confused at first, but he told her who he was. He was the one that she killed. He then manifested himself into a shadowy mass of darkness and turned into the Shadow Rat. Mary was beyond scared and ran away, but he got on her tail. He chased her for as long as she could run until she inevitably got tired and he was able to get her. She pleaded for her life, but he said, "You must atone for your sins, little one," and cut her deeply in the leg, just to give her a taste of how it feels. Mary screamed in pain, and he was about to strike at her head. But then, the rat and the cat jumped out from the bushes and attacked the shadow rat. They got pushed into the black parts and slipped under like water. Mary crawled to where they slipped up and tried to get under, and was able to break through the glass. Odd. They were all free-falling until suddenly Mary was awake. She was being protected by Kitty and Ratty, while the shadow rat was circling them like prey. Just then, he striked as well as Kitty. Rat pushed Mary under the bed and covered the opening with a blanket and joined Kitty in the fight. Mary couldn't do anything else but listen to the chaos outside. After what felt like forever, it went silent. Then the shadow rat grabbed her from underneath and raised her in the air. He told her, "Maybe you shouldn't have ran into that locker now." Mary was confused, but then a sudden realization came across her face. She remembered. Shock and worry enveloped the shadow rat, and he started to disintegrate along with everything else around Mary. He yells, damning Mary for remembering, and then suddenly, Mary awakes in her bed. It's morning. In the following weeks, Mary was able to put the puppeteer in prison, as she remembered what happened, everything. Nathan was shocked and angry at the little girl, telling her she wouldn't just get away with it. Mary left that day a changed person. She thanked the origami cat for all of her help in getting her memories back, and the origami cat just smiled. And so Mary continued on with her life, now with her new imaginary friends, Ratty and Kitty, who would be by her side until she was just 13 years old. I want to do a detour here to explain why would Richard, the Shadow Rat, want to prevent Mary from remembering who actually killed him. To that I say, since he was able to master the afterlife, manifesting himself as monsters and possessing objects, perhaps he could get his life back, he thought. If Mary hadn't remembered that last day, he could go back, prevent his death. That's why he tried to stop it before she remembered. No, it's a little confusing, but that was his mindset. Why wouldn't it be, right? Jaden saw what happened as an accident, since Clayton didn't die. Since she still obtained the company and only tragedy happened with the rat and cat, they were completely scrapped and the whole idea of performers at a theater was pitched. Instead, she decided to completely rebrand the company and go strictly on an animatronic entertainment route. After a couple of strings being pulled, in 1980, she was able to get a much bigger and better location. She had created 2 new characters to star in this restaurant. Candy was changed. His character was remade blue, taller, and more approachable to children. His second character was Blank, and the animatronic that can be drawn on and swapped out with paper sheets that slide on his body. She always loved drawing, so this character was very special to her. In the months leading up to the opening, the rat and cat animatronics were transported separately. Cat went back to the factory he was made in, and the rat was transported to the new restaurant for budget reasons. Richard was saddened that he was separated from his best friend, which made him even more corrupt and angry. But he couldn't do anything about it. Mary had got away, and he was trapped within this new restaurant. As oversight that happened with the AI was put into the new robots, the AI was increasingly upgrading itself to the point where the new robots actually developed sentience. They were aware, they had feelings, personalities, all of that, just like a human. This new life was an amazing blessing, thought Candy and Blank. And so, the time came in June of 1980, and the Candy's Burgers and Fries had its grand opening, and it was an instant success, being both quality food and fun at a cheap price. Candy and Blank lived their glory days singing, playing, hanging for the next 7 years. In January of 1987, a birthday party would be hosted for a child named Blake Thompson, who loved candies with a passion. However, this birthday wasn't going his way. He was bullied for being too old to like it and just wasn't having a good time. He ran away into the ticket booth crying and sad that his birthday was pretty much ruined. Candy would find this child, however, and not long after, able to cheer him up with his good old Candy's charm. Blake ran off and Candy followed suit, but then saw his much older brother, Connor Thompson, scolding him and getting frustrated at running away like that. How could he be so careless in a stupid restaurant like this? Blake was crying, upset that his own brother would yell at him like this. Candy, in his code, wouldn't allow anyone to be punished on the property and scanned Connor as a criminal. And so, just following his programming, he attacked him, mauling him to death. Blake tried to stop Candy, but Candy scratched him back and Blake bled out to death. A panic ensued and Jaden flipped a switch that deactivated the animatronics, and they were almost deactivated immediately. 911 was called, but there was nothing they could do other than to take the bodies when they got there. Candy's was put on lockdown for investigation and found that faulty wiring was at play and closed the following week. However, the souls of the brothers who died would find themselves possessing the robots that took their lives away, finding new life inside the animatronics. Blake possessed Blank, and Connor possessed Candy. It's here where I want to explain how possession works in this alternate universe. So, it's pretty self-explanatory, but I know it can be a little bit confusing at times. So we have the base animatronic, which has its own personality and traits. However, a child or adult possessing an animatronic can take control of the body and turn into that animatronic. Their eyes would turn gray, letting one know that they were possessed by that soul. And of course, when the spirit is angry or hunting, their eyes turn to black. Got it? Good. Simple explanation. Let's continue. Jaden felt responsible, that she couldn't prevent a tragedy from happening, but this was Charles and Richard's dream. She couldn't stop now, not after all she's made. So, following the footsteps of them, she mustered on, looking forward and not backwards. The original animatronics would not be used again, as it would continue to put a bad image on Candy's and its brand. They would need to be shipped back to the factory and used for parts of the new animatronics ordered. After the necessary parts were taken, they were placed in their rightful spots, Blank in his drawing room and Old Candy in the parts room. After this, Candy's would get a whole new makeover, with all new entertainment, building design, and of course, a cast of characters. During the summer of 1987, a whole slew of events would happen. The first thing to happen would be the death of Nathan Richards. Being in jail for so long and the thought of his life was over was enough to make the man pass away in jail. However, his tortured and angry soul would continue to breathe new life. This soul wouldn't go to possess anything, but manifest itself as Vinny, the very puppet he had all those years ago. All those years ago, Rat and Cat Theater. Now free from his physical form and terribly, terribly angry, he vowed that he would receive his peace once Mary was dead. The new cast of characters would be commissioned and built during this time as well, these being Candy the Cat, Cindy the Cat, Chester the Chimp, and 3 penguin serving bots. Things seemed to go to plan, but as it always seems with Candy's, tragedy sadly struck. See, Vinny needed something else to kill Mary, since he was only an apparition, not real. He would need something physical to kill her. Luckily, his old pal Candy and Co. would be a great choice. Not only that, but a group of 4 kids would often play around the factory at night. This plan was set. Vinny went and possessed the decommissioned cat animatronic and lured the children to him. First was the twins Tim and Tina. He managed to snatch Tim first, crushing his hand and pushing him into the welding machine, mangling him to death. Tina found the carnage and broke down. He managed to snatch her as well and befall the same fate. He would wander outside where Chloe was playing. She was an easy target, and went and disemboweled her. Last was Jamal, who wanted to get out. Unfortunately for him, he would receive death just like the others, being thrown into the trash compactor. Vinny then depossessed the animatronic just as the animatronics were finished. He then gave life to the animatronics with the souls he now had. Tim possessed Candy, Tina possessed Cindy, Jamal possessed Chester, and Chloe possessed the female penguin. The time was right, and the next day the animatronics would be shipped to the new Candy's Burgers and Fries. Opening day was in November, just as Freddy was closing its doors. It was time for Vinny to make his move. Vinny knew that eventually, Mary would have to come back to face her demons. The night time was the only time Vinny could try and get his revenge. See, the souls of the kids could never control the animatronics during the daytime hours, but during the night, they had full control over the robots. Before they knew it, they woke up within the suits. The souls were confused, scared, angry. They didn't know what was going on. But Vinny came to them, and being the master manipulator and puppeteer he was, told them this story. He told them that the woman named Mary Rose had killed them in cold blood, that she was their murderer, and that the only way to get set free was to kill her back. The souls were so angry and confused that they didn't even question it, and took it at face value. Even Connor and Blake, who weren't even murdered by her. Being able to have control strictly at night, specifically to 12 a.m. to 6 a.m., they targeted the only person who would be there, the night guard. The restaurant went about a week in before the first night guard came into the picture, that being Marla Rose, Mary's sister. She applied to be the night guard and was quickly accepted. The animatronics were ready for whoever came through that door. If Vinny was right, it had to be Mary. Marla would only work 3 nights in the night shift, however, as she would be bombarded with animatronics, trying to kill her. She was beyond confused and terribly scared. Why were they acting this way? It got so bad that she even brought a wrench on her 3rd night. She would plead with the manager, Leonard, to go with her, but he refused, thinking that she was just way too paranoid. She does have a major anxiety disorder after all, so he never really thought much of it. Anyways, on her last night, she managed to damage Candy and Penguin and severely damage Blank, who tried to break through the glass. In the middle of the night, she immediately ran home, and the next day, put in a transfer to the day shift. She got into some major trouble, but Leonard just let her off with a warning. His reason? It was just too early to fire anyone in Candy's early opening. But everyone knew what the real reason was. He may have had a little crush on her, but he denies it. Whatever the reason, she stayed on the day shift, and Candy's went on. A lot has happened since we last saw Mary at 10 years old. She grew up, she went to school, and met a man named Mike Schmidt, who would she grow a close bond to, date, and quickly marry in 1986. Mary would take her husband's name, and her name was changed from Mary Rose to Mary Schmidt. Being such a young couple, they got a small-sized apartment together and started looking for work to pay rent, Mary would get the newspaper one day and see that the new Candy's Burgers and Fries was hiring a night guard. She thought it was perfect. She was already the best for the job. She would often stay up during the evenings and nights and had experience in other places, and so she headed down for an interview, where she ran into her sister. Marla warned and pleaded she'd not take the night shift, telling her about her 3 nights there, but Mary did not believe her. Marla would always try to scare her and prank her, and with her anxiety on top of that, she just thought it was another attempt at scaring her. She would get the interview and get the job for the night shift. And the next night, she would start her week. This was it. Vinny finally got her back, and the animatronics went on the prowl once again. And this time, he was determined that they would get her. Over Mary's week in the office, she would fight off the angry animatronics. They got ever more aggressive as the night went on. But on night 5, the rat would finally come out to take his revenge on the one that damned him and his best friend. He talked to her, and Mary remembered him. It was Roger from the Rat and Cat Theater, and that shadowy monster from her traumatic childhood nightmares. He tried to explain it, that it wasn't her fault, and that he was just upset, but the rat wasn't gonna play by the book. He was just too angry, and got into a physical fight with her. Mary used everything at her disposal, her flashlight, her pocket knife, anything to fight back, and it was close. The rat managed to scratch her arm deep and hard, leaving her defenseless in the hallway where Candy, Cindy, and Chester would find her. But, to her luck, the 6 a.m. chime came, and the animatronics shut down, no longer controlled by the spirits now that it was officially the day shift. Mary ran out. She immediately went to the hospital, called Mike, and got her arm stitched and bandaged up. She wondered if she should go back for her last night. She needed to get a paycheck, but she could also lose her life. However, she was determined to make it one more night and get her paycheck to pay rent and some wedding bills. She just had to do it. So she went back, and to her surprise, no one was moving. It was such a quiet night that she actually fell asleep. But when she did, she was introduced to a twisted, purple world. It was Candy's, but everything was tinted purple, and there was tons of wires around the place. She was beyond confused and turned on the cameras only to be greeted to a shadowy figure. The Shadow Candy. Mary tried to talk to the shadow, but it wasn't responding. It was attacking. Her last night was a one-on-one fight with the Shadow Candy, who was a very clever fighter. However, she made it to 6 a.m., where then the place went dark. A spotlight came on to show it was the Origami Cat, her guide to the dreamscape all those years ago. The Origami Cat finally introduced herself as Sheila Rose, Mary's mother. Mary was shocked. She didn't believe it, but the Origami Cat showed her it was true. She manifested herself into her ghost form. It was indeed her mother. She explained that the Shadow Candy was her dark manifestation of herself. Her anger, her confusion, fused into one entity. This is why she tried to attack Mary. She couldn't control the animal within the 12-6 rule of the ghosts leading the robots. Mary was confused but understood. She was just so happy to see her mom again after so long. Sheila proclaimed that she would always be with her, in the form of the Origami Cat. It is her safe place, and safe from the Shadow Candy. Mary was very happy to see that she was okay. She asked her to come home with her, but Sheila declined. She explained to Mary that Candy's Burgers and Fries was a very special place, and that she needed to stay, to make sure things were, quote, going to plan. Mary didn't quite understand, but she accepted. She said her last goodbye to her mom before waking up, now 8 a.m. Mary would quickly take a day shift job where she would be close to her sister and her mother's spirit. She would make friends with Leonard, the manager, and even make friends with the animatronics themselves. She worked a full-time gig, so she would be there from opening to closing, with plenty of time to hang with her friends, the manager, and the animatronics, of course. Speaking of Marla, she would go on to develop a romantic relationship with the manager, Leonard. Working together all the time with so much more time together, they simply gained a strong bond. Mary, Marla, and Leonard worked at Candy's until 1989, when new management and rebranding would come, and they would be let go by the owner. Lots of other things would also happen within this time. 2 of the 3 penguin bots would suddenly stop working, leaving the female penguin as the only penguin bot functional. The rat would occasionally try to lure unsuspecting children and nab, but ultimately never worked. The building also went through heavy restyling, from everything to the walls, floors, toys, arcades, and even some of the animatronics. In 1990, Candy and Cindy would get new shells to fit the new, rebranded, and upgraded software, becoming New Candy and New Cindy. Even the Penguin got upgraded software. This ushered in a new age for candies, as well as the inevitable fall yet to come. 1990 to 1993. Oh boy. Vinny was even more angry and tortured. With Mary no longer being at the restaurant and moved on, he wouldn't be able to enact his revenge. But that didn't stop him from manipulating the souls even more to his will. New night guards came and went, and they would continue to attack and fight them, but to no avail. Sheila knew that this couldn't go on. Her duty now was to get all the souls together into one place, so it can finally end. But without Charles's soul at Candy's, it couldn't end properly. The only way she could get them all together is if the restaurant would be shut down and the robots shipped back to the place they were built. So, she started her game plan. She first lured away Chester by tempting him with the backroom key. He would open it and be greeted by an angry rat, dismantling him on the spot. However, the penguin would find the parts of him and put him back together. Sadly, though, he wouldn't be put back on any stage. This drove down sales for the restaurant, but it wasn't enough to get it closed. She would then try to tempt Blank, leaving out kids' drawings for him to find, in which he would find on off days, not open days. She wanted it to be on open days so that maybe haywire animatronics would be enough, but it still wasn't. She would become so desperate that she would even steal and hide away Candy's iconic tie, but Cindy would find it for him. This strange behavior led staff to believe that the robots were becoming unstable, and the night shift reports weren't any better. This was it. Her time to push it over the edge. In August of 1993, Shadow Candy would put voices in the rat's head to go and attack the current night guard and kill him. The rat was overcome by it, and one night, he headed to the office and mauled the night guard to death. The following morning, Candy would be led by the Shadow Candy and find the horror in the office. He would be then led to the back room, before the technician and 2 officers would come busting in and discharge him, along with the rest of the robots. Authorities and the general public believed that the robots were just too dangerous, and in the same day, Candy's had officially closed. Jaden knew her time was up. Too many rumors, too many tragedies, and admitted defeat. She would dispatch the company, and Candy's was officially closed forever. In the following months, the robots would be sent back to the Robotics Corp, the factory they were built in and the kids were killed in. Being heavily connected to Candy's, the factory had also closed down, leaving the place abandoned for 14 years. In that time, the robots withered away, breaking down. The souls believed that they would never get set free, and Vinny knew that if he would get his revenge or not. Nevertheless, he continued to manipulate the souls. All of them. The rat, Richard, and the cat, Charles, reunited and were happy to see each other again, but were still very angry, still believing all those years it was Mary who screwed them over, and that's what it would be. However, 2007 would come along, the year that would change nearly everything, when Marilyn would come into play. Whoo boy, so I'm terrible. Marilyn Schmidt, the 17-year-old goth girl from school. Times were rough, as her mother and father were looking for new work, but she had her friends, her loyal and best friends. This friend group, however, was often reckless, and they liked to do serious dares on each other, do things that were very risky and sometimes could seriously hurt them, but it gave their lives thrill and reason, and they made sure nothing went too far, or, killed them. One night, Marilyn's friend decided to give her another bet. This time, she bet Marilyn a classic taunt that she wouldn't give her crush the most passionate and loving kiss for 1 whole minute and see what he does. She was prepared and ready, but chickened out at the last minute. She had lost the bet, which means she was the one to spend a whole week at the old factory just up the road. She was not happy with this, but a bet was a bet. The next week, Marilyn packed up some things for the night, a sleeping bag, some snacks, and her phone. However, she knew that if she told her parents where she was truly going, they would absolutely flip. So she made an excuse that she was leaving to prepare for a huge final in their class. Mary and Mike took it at face value and trusted their daughter. And so, with a lie set in motion, she went off to the factory to complete her dare. Marilyn started her week. The animatronics that resided in there were taken aback. No one had come into the building for years, maybe even a decade at this point. Cindy, or more accurately Tina, was the first to check it out. Once she saw who it was, she was struck. It was Mary? Did she do something different to her hair? Must have, but it was her, or so they thought. See, the animatronics mistook Marilyn for her mother, Mary. They looked so alike, they didn't even question it. It had to be her, but they couldn't be sure. It has been years after all. However, Vinny was not going to let them be hesitant. He demanded they attack her and reminded them of how she murdered them in cold blood. Of course, he knew the truth. It was her daughter. However, he figured if he could kill her daughter, that could be a good lure to bring Mary back so he can finish her off for good. And so, the animatronics came out of retirement and attacked once again. Over the week, she would be bombarded with animatronics attacking. She couldn't understand what was going on, but she had to fight back against them. However, it was proving to be a toll on her. Nearly dying every night gave her nightmares and terrible visions of the past. She would start to uncover the truth behind the robots, both in her visions and the papers from the old factory. They were possessed by the children that went missing all those years ago. On that Friday, she confronted the robots, not with violence, but with words. She spoke to them about the past and the hurt they must be going through. She was able to calm them down. The spirits were just too broken at this point to continue to fight. They didn't want to hurt anymore. They just wanted to be set free. But Vinny told them that she must die in order for that to happen. Marilyn finally understood why they were attacking. They mistook her for her mom. It all made sense now. She continued, saying that she would help the spirits in any way she can. The animatronics calmed down and agreed to her kindness. Over the week, she would treat them with fun, games, and food, while also trying to think of a way to set them free. Marilyn tried to think of ways to free the souls, but she didn't even know where to begin with it. How does one free a soul? Wait, she figured it out. Her mother, Mary, knew the most about these guys. After all, she did work at the old candies for almost 5 years. So she went to her mother and told her about the factory and how they're all still here, stuck in the suits. Mary was shocked. She figured that they had moved on after the place was closed, but apparently not. She said to Marilyn that she would absolutely help, but she also didn't know how to free them either. Just then, someone came to them. It was Sheila Rose. She discussed how the closing was caused by her hand, and she had to get the animatronics all together so that they can get burned in a final blaze of glory. She tasked them to go back to the factory and end it all. Mary and Marilyn returned to the factory the next Friday. Marilyn stayed outside to open up the gas pipes inside so that the fire would be more powerful and spread quicker. Mary went inside to light the fire. As she went through, Mary ran into the rat and cat, Roger and Charles. For the first time, they didn't fight. They talked. Rat and Cat gave a sincere apology to her. They had thought she had ruined their lives for so long, but they finally realized it wasn't her fault. Marilyn showed them that. Mary forgave them and explained what she had to do. They didn't stop her. She then ran into Candy, Tim. She told her how he expected to see her eventually. He yelled and explained the pain he felt, the pain everyone is feeling, how they've been trusting Vinny and how they just wanted to be set free. Mary explained that she was here to do that and apologized to him that it took so long to do. Candy broke and cried in Mary's arms. She confronted him and promised that he would be set free along with all of his friends tonight as she comforted him. Candy then asked the difficult question, why did she kill them? Before she could answer, Vinny came in all cocky, saying things like, yeah, Mary, why did you? And then she snapped back. She demanded Vinny tell the kids the truth, that it was truly Vinny that killed them, and brainwashed them into being his puppets, and attacked her and her daughter. Vinny got dismissive, but as Mary went on, he got more and more nervous. Candy and the gang were thinking it over, looking over all the points. They remembered. It wasn't her. It truly wasn't. It was him. It was Vinny. And they have been lied to this whole time, being used as puppets. How could he? Mary told them he knew who to attack now. She lit the match, looking into Candy's eyes, and dropped the flame. And then, boom! The place exploded in a huge fire. Mary quickly started to get out of the building, but Vinny chased after her, desperately trying to keep her inside it. But Candy and his gang had it. They attacked him, and it was brutal. One by one, each animatronic had their hand out at getting their revenge and anger at him. But the final ones were Rat and Cat, and they didn't hold anything back. He was the one that ruined their lives, their dreams. Vinny's physical form was mangled beyond repair or recognition. They had done it. Vinny, Nathan Richards, was no more. The rising sun revealed the completely destroyed building. All the animatronic bodies were burned and rusted beyond recognition, and the spirits flew out of them. They all embraced in a group hug, excited for what lies beyond them. After they spent some time together, the sky opened up for them. Tim, Tina, Jamal, Chloe, Blake, and Connor. They took each other's hands and flew up into the sky, and in a flash of light, they were at long last set free. Roger and Charles, however, stayed behind in their animatronic prisons. They didn't know why, but they felt they needed to stay behind. But this was it for them. Mary and Marilyn took their final words to Candy's, remember what it meant and what it did to them, turned away, never looked back, and headed home. That chapter in their lives was finally over. At last, the Candy Saga, what started as a dream of two men 47 years ago, that turned into a story of revenge and loss of legacy, survival and understanding, had finally come to an end. A woman stands before the ruins of a long-abandoned factory, now purchased by Sweet Times Incorporated, and much of it was cleaned up and shipped off. She was never truly accepted by anyone. She was an outcast, pathetic, a freak by many, as she was born with two different colored eyes. Veronica took a breath and said, "I don't belong here. I don't belong anywhere." As she looked on, ready to claim her own life, a voice came to her. "I can make you belong." Nathan Richards had just nabbed a new puppet.